Hello, and welcome to Will's Infinite Library. I'm Will, and this is my infinite library. Today I wanted to talk about the other thing on my shelves, which are video games. I've mentioned in several videos that I don't read as much fantasy these days as I used to when I was younger, and I think a lot of that is because video games have replaced fantasy in my life. That's where I get fantasy from, where I get escapism and fall into these big, deep worlds that I love. So I don't read as many fantasy books these days. I often tend to play RPGs, which are role-playing games, because they are very story heavy. A lot of video games are narrative driven, but RPGs are known for having deep, rich stories and for that being kind of the focus of why people love them. So I wanted to talk today about some of my favorite RPGs, which all happen to be JRPGs, which are Japanese role-playing games, and they all happen to be on the Nintendo Switch. And I often tend to gravitate towards JRPGs for a couple of reasons. Not just because they're made in Japan, but because they typically tend to be brighter, more colorful worlds, more fun and lighthearted, kind of quirky. You usually have a team of characters, a kind of strange battle system that makes things interesting, whereas Western RPGs tend to be more dark and gritty and driven by a single character, which is fun too, but it's just a kind of a different style. So the first game I wanted to talk about on this list is Baten Kaitos. This is two games, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean, and Baten Kaitos Origins, which was a prequel that came out a couple years after the original did. These came out originally on the GameCube in the early 2000s. I played the first game at the time, really enjoyed it, but could never beat the final boss, so I always wanted to play it again. And it just came out on Switch as a 2-game collection, so I picked it up. I finally got through it again. I really enjoyed it, really loved it, and finally played Baten Kaitos Origins as well, which I also loved, but had a different kind of battle system. They're both card-based battle systems in both games. The first one, where you kind of make poker hands, like you want to make straights and combos of the same number of cards to cast bigger spells, do more damage. And in the second game, you want to string together combos and sequences of cards, and it goes much faster. So both are fun in different ways. The first game is more kind of high fantasy, and the second one is more, I don't know if steampunk is the right term, maybe kind of steampunky. And they're both great. I love the first one especially, though the music is amazing. Like, its soundtrack is one of my favorite soundtracks of video games, movies, anything. I listen to it all the time. I love it so much. It's so epic and beautiful, so different, amazing. Check that out, definitely. If you take nothing away from this video, listen to Baten Kaitos' soundtrack, and it's amazing, I promise. Hi, it's Editing Will here from the future. I forgot to mention something very important about Baten Kaitos, which is that if we're talking about video games as narrative, that game has one of the most intense and surprising plot twists of anything I've ever seen, like any movies or books or video games. The way that it's told, the perspective, allows it to have a twist within the main character that you're playing as that you don't see coming, which is incredible and really cool. Anyway, just wanted to mention that, and I will go back to the future now. See you. Next, this is kind of a cop-out. Next on my list is Final Fantasy. I have a bunch of Final Fantasy games on Switch. These are all remakes, notably the 1 to 6 collection, which has the first 6 games, which were on retro systems, then 7, 8, and 9, which were originally on the PlayStation 1, and then these two, 10 and 12, came out on the PS2, and then Crisis Core originally came out on the PSP, I believe. So these are all, it's so nice to have these in a collection on one system now. All games that I loved when I was younger. Some of the first RPGs I played in my life were Final Fantasy games, so they hold a special place in my heart. And if I had to pick one, it's always going to be Final Fantasy VII. That was one of the first ones I played, and it really gripped me. And the story and the world are just so great. The combat system is really fun. A lot of cool kind of customization options, and it changed my life. Quite honestly, like the story and some of the themes that come up about the life force of the planet really made me see life and the universe and religion and everything in a new light that really opened my eyes. So that game will always hold a really special place in my heart. Next up is another cop-out, another series, Xenoblade Chronicles, also made by Monolith Soft, the same company that made Baten Kaitos. This is like their newer series that's still ongoing. Xenoblade Chronicles, the original one, is still my favorite, again, because, like I said with JRPGs, I love the beautiful, colorful worlds, the imaginative stories. Usually there's a really strong religious or philosophical theme to them, and the music in this game again is so good. So again, that's something like, even if you're not a big gamer, check that out. Beautiful. And a lot of the themes resonate from Final Fantasy VII into that game as well. So cool. Next, I'm going to talk about another older game, Chrono Cross, which was originally on the PS1, I believe, which was a sequel to Chrono Trigger, which is a lot of people's favorite JRPG of all time. I really like the sequel again for the same reason. The themes, the beautiful colors, the soundtrack, so good again. The theme from the world map I love so much. I listen to it all the time. And this game has like tons of characters in this beautiful kind of tropical world, and a lot of fun customization again, a really cool, different, unique battle system that is just amazing. So I love this game as well. And then the last of my kind of top 5, even though I've been showing you stacks of games, are the 2 Fire Emblem games on Switch, or the mainline Fire Emblem games on Switch, Three Houses and Engage. Three Houses was the first Fire Emblem game I played. It's very narrative driven, almost like a visual novel, in the story about these 3 houses of characters, these 3 leading characters of the houses, and the students that they kind of lead as armies, and you get to know each of them, and they're all fun and different and unique, and you can pick one at the start of the game that you go along with, so you can play it a million times. It's so good. The story is great. I didn't love the battle, honestly. I found it a bit tedious, but I loved the story so much. And then I was hesitant to pick up Fire Emblem Engage, which came out a year or 2 ago. It's the most recent one, because the story seemed weird and kind of generic and not fun. But I picked it up because I liked the first one, so I thought I'd try it. And I loved the combat. I thought it was so fun, really quick and fast-paced and engaging. It had a lot of different elements to it that made it really fun. And the story, I thought, like, it wasn't like super groundbreaking, but I thought it was fun and engaging, and I was caught up in it, and it swept me along. I really enjoyed it too. So those were my top 5 Switch games, and I do have a few honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about, which are... The first up, I debated including this because it kind of has to be, but Pokemon. I love Pokemon, but what I love about it is different than what I love about these other JRPGs, which is why I kind of didn't put it in that category of my favorite Switch JRPGs, because what I love about it isn't the same elements, the story, the characters, the world, the music. It's just fun to collect Pokemon. Let's be honest. So I look at it as like kind of a fun collect-a-thon. Like, it's fun to collect them. The battles are fun, still cute and colorful and fun world, but just different than what I like about those other games that are like my top tier. Which isn't to say I don't enjoy them as much, because I do. And then next on my list, I have Ys. This is another series of games. This is the only one I have physical, so I'm showing you Ys 9. Not my favorite. My favorite is Ys 8, actually. These are fun action JRPGs, and 8 just had a big colorful open world in this kind of nautical theme where you're exploring this island. Just found it to be super fun. And 9 is fun too, but it's in a city, and it's a bit darker and grittier, which isn't really my jam, and it's in a lot of buildings. A lot of the gameplay is in buildings rather than in a big open beautiful island. Not as much my fave. Next on my list are a couple that I also don't have physical copies of, which are Steamworld Quest, which is a card-based indie game, which is just super fun. Also has a beautiful soundtrack. And Super Mario RPG, which a remake of came out recently for Switch, which is really fun. And then the next thing I had on my list was another kind of batch of games. These are a bunch of Square Enix games that are more just classic JRPG experiences with turn-based battle and just very straightforward JRPG mechanics. Octopath Traveler 2, Triangle Strategy, which is a strategic game more like Fire Emblem, Bravely Default 2, and Dragon Quest XI. Just really classic, great JRPG gameplay, really fun, but don't stand out on that like higher level to me personally. And the other one I want to mention is The World Ends With You and Neo The World Ends With You. I think that, yeah. And Neo The World Ends With You, which came out recently, and this is an older game that got remade. These are really interesting, like kind of, they're not really music-based games, but the music is really strong in them. They have this kind of like Tokyo kind of punk sound to them, if that makes any sense. Really fun, like kind of poppy, upbeat songs. And they have this battle system where you use pins that you can tap on the screen and swipe around to use different abilities and then level up the pins. And it feels, it's really like real contemporary world setting, which is really fun because you're wandering the streets of Tokyo in real areas of the city. So they're just really fun. Their soundtracks are really fun too, quite different. Not the kind of high fantasy soundtracks, but more like contemporary pop music. But there's some real bangers on there too. And then the last game I wanted to mention as an honorable mention is Live Alive. This is an old, I think, Super Nintendo game that was recently remade on the Switch. And it's really, really interesting and kind of experimental. It's similar to Octopath Travel in that there are a bunch of different characters and stories that you follow, but they come together a lot more in this game. And I think it was kind of an inspiration for that game as well. But it takes place with characters throughout time. It reminds me a lot of Cloud Atlas. And that's actually kind of what inspired me to pick it up and play it, is because I was interested in those kind of books. Like I talked about Appleseed recently on this channel, and Cloud Atlas I have not read, but I want to read. And these like books with characters across time and different worlds that come together from different stories. And that's exactly what this game is. Very experimental. Each character is different, lives in a different world, a different time, has different abilities. So there's a lot of variety. It's really cool. And yeah, just wanted to mention that one. So those are my top 5 plus honorable mentions of Nintendo Switch JRPGs that I just love and wanted to tell you all about. Yeah, let me know what you think of this video. If there are any games that you love that you want to mention here, if you've played any of these or want to, or they remind you of any books that you've read, let me know in the comments below. And with that, I'll let you get back to reading and or gaming or whatever else you do in life. Working? I don't know. Anyway, thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time.